everyone, and welcome to this emergency edition of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Podcast Network. I'm Jaymes, joined by Ryan and Steve Garshinsky. We're here to talk about Craig Counsell's maybe not so surprising departure from the Brewers, and his definitely surprising joining of the Chicago Cubs. Scrambled to get together to talk about it here on a Monday night while the wounds were still fresh. So keep that in mind if you listen to this a little bit later in the week. And if we find out more information that makes all this ranting invalid, we'll talk about that on the next episode. But for now, we're all kind of miserable and angry and here to yell about it. So hopefully this will be therapeutic. It'll probably definitely need the explicit tag. Sorry, Ryan. But before we get to that, a reminder, you can support us on the podcast network, patreon.com/MKE Tailgate. Ball and Glove and above patrons get the Minor League Extra podcast with Ryan and Jaymes. You also get Paul's reporting as eligible Packers mini pods as part of that deal as well. He could not make this time work, but just go follow him on Twitter at Badger Noonan. You can probably guess how he feels about this. He's likewise disgruntled, but we'll catch him the next time he's on it. And usually we ask or say that patrons get question priority, but we have so many questions ourselves. We're not going to do questions. We're just here to kind of sit around and be miserable together and hopefully get through this together. So I guess we were just kind of briefly talking about this before we started recording here, but how did you find out about this news, Steve?
That would have been on Twitter. I'm trying to think who broke it first.
Rosenthal.
There was the Rosenthal tweet. So yeah, it was old school following something that way.
Nice.
The last remnants of Twitter being useful, and this is what it did to us. So
there's a lesson in there somewhere.
A kick in the groin from Elon. That's what we get before that hell site finally dies.
Yeah.
Ryan, you were in physical pain.
Yeah, I was flat
pain.
on my back on the floor in my living room because my sciatic nerve was acting up. And so I have a protocol I have to go through when that happens to make sure that it doesn't get worse and actually really cause problems for me. So I was flat on my back in my living room, and I started to see the news come that there was something coming quickly. And then we saw that he wouldn't be with the Brewers, but he also wasn't going to be with the Mets because at that exact moment, it broke that the Mets were hiring the Yankees bench coach. And then we saw that Cleveland was making a hire that maybe came a little bit before. And so then that set the mind to wondering what was going to happen. And only the most jaded and cynical and pessimistic dared to suggest the Cubs. Everybody seemed to think it was the Yankees. And then that Rosenthal tweet. Yeah.
I did.
Oh, yeah.
I said, LOL, he's going to the Cubs, isn't he? Kind of as a joke.
Yeah.
But,
no, it was as a joke.
Turned out to be. Yeah.
Well, I mean, when they said it was weird because the way it was reported that, it's with a team that already has a manager. So you knew that they were waiting because they had to tell the guy he was fired before he found out oh yeah, by the way, you've been replaced. So, that was pretty unique. I don't really remember a transaction going down like that before, where they fired a manager or a coach or something, and the other guy hadn't been notified yet, so it had to wait to find out who it actually was.
Weirdly, the Cubs have done this before. It's how the Joe Madden situation played out, where he left the Rays, and it was the Rays at that point.
Yeah.
And the Cubs had just hired Rick Renteria the year before, and they had to kind of unceremoniously dump him before jumping on Joe Madden. So this seems to be a thing the Cubs like to do. It just wasn't Craig Counsell last time.
Yeah, some people's bodies tell them when the weather's changing, and apparently Ryan's will tell us when there's a bad transaction happening for the Brewers.
Yeah,
there we go.
Not great.
Left you literally flat on your back.
Well, hey, and it wasn't as bad as JR, who had a root canal this morning and then either awoke or got to see the news as it was ending or going on or something. So JR had to work. Way worse. Yeah. JR had it.
That's the
way
news
worse.
industry.
It's like those videos online where somebody comes out of anesthesia and they're like, "Oh, it's a zombie apocalypse."
Yeah, exactly. No way he believed that. All right.
Hey, JR, it's a content apocalypse.
Oh, boy. Yeah. All right. Well, as we talked about, a year of wondering, discussing, handicapping the odds. The Craig Counsell saga obviously ended with news that he'd be taking over the Cubs after almost a decade at the helm with the Brewers. Again, not the Mets, not the Guardians, not even the Astros, but the freaking Cubs, who didn't even technically have an opening at the time, as we mentioned, but they decided to make him, I guess, the highest paid manager of all time with a 5-year, $40 million contract, that $8 million annual average, believed to be higher than the previous record set by Joe Torre toward the end of his run with the Yankees. So, we had heard he was looking for a market resetting deal, and it looks like he definitely got that. We got a lot of ground to cover in a short time to do it. So I guess scale of 1 to 10, first off, how stunned were you when you saw the tweet that'd be the Cubs and not the Brewers? We kind of touched on this, but it was a hot 15-20 minutes where we're trying to figure out what the hell is going on because it wasn't the Mets, but it also wasn't the Brewers. So I guess, Ryan, let's start with you. Just how incredibly stunned were you? Scale of 1 to 10 or 20 or 50?
Yeah, I mean, it's a 10. If anything's a 10, this is a 10. I had really hoped that wasn't going to be the case for about 20 minutes at that point. But yeah, when I saw it, that was a heart in throat moment, and just you felt the sinking and just your stomach. Physical reaction from me. It was bad. I do not care to have that happen again. That was really painful and awful.
It was just the sciatica. Everything else is secondary. No, you were going through it in our group chat too. That was tough to see that evolve in real time. Just the realization Ryan had come before him.
Yeah,
it was
that was unpleasant because it was as an ongoing thing when it's wait, who could it possibly be? And then it turns out to be the Cubs. It's the worst possible outcome. I disagree a little bit with Steve on this. I think it's that and the Cardinals are 1 and 1A, and I care not to differentiate between them. But yeah,
like I said, the Cardinals have history and they're a historically well-run organization. It would be irritating, but I get it. Mm-hmm. That I would get. But the Cubs, I'm you're going to a terribly run organization with horrible owners and are basically it's a slap in the face to all Brewers fans to go to that organization specifically. So yeah, no, he definitely picked the worst. If he thought he was spiting the Brewers, no, I think he spited the fan base, or at least I personally took it.
Oof. Wow.
Yeah,
taking it
as a slap in the face. I took this one personally. He could have gone to any other team. I would have been I get it, man. Do what you got to do. Go where you want to go. But no, he picked the one team where I'm no, fuck you, Craig Counsell. Fuck you.
There's your E-tag.
Yeah, there it is. It didn't take long. It felt like Brett Favre to the Vikings, kind of.
No, Favre went somewhere else for a year.
That is true. Well, only because he was forced. But he always wanted to go to the Vikings. That was always what he wanted to do, specifically out of spite. And this has the feel of a spite move, even if it necessarily isn't.
And old man quarterbacks want a first round draft pick for a wide receiver to throw to. So he wanted Randy Moss. They all do that. Rodgers did that too. There's something when you get over 35, all you want is that first round tag on a wide receiver to say you have them. I don't know. They just get into their little baby mode.
All right. So I guess, Ryan wrote this question down and I felt like it was melodramatic in the moment a little bit, but I guess Steve, with that said, just how dark of a day is this in franchise history to you?
Yeah, this one's pretty dark. Like I said, because of where he went. Any other place, it would be a blip. I wouldn't really worry about it too much. But since he went to the Cubs, this one, like I said, personally stings in a way. And people could say oh, I don't care or whatever. But yeah, like I said, as somebody who was a Craig Counsell fan for the entire run and would defend anything he did with the organization, without thought, for him to do this, this is a pretty dark one.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I was 3 years old in 1982 when the Brewers lost Game 7 of the World Series. But yeah,
but you're in the World Series when that happened,
right? Yeah, no, yeah. I know. I think probably the night that the Brewers got knocked out in 2011, because it just felt like this was as close as we were going to get, and that it was going to be a long slog to get back to that point, with kind of, it felt like the end of an era with Fielder leaving, even though, they were able to, it wasn't really, but it still kind of was like they.
Yeah, but the difference there is Ron Renicky won playoff games.
Oh, we're starting with that already.
We're starting with the bitterness. Yeah, the funny part about this is, I'm not going to be the most bitter about this.
I will easily be the most bitter about this.
Yeah. So, it sucks. There are a few worse days than this, especially just because of the context and because of every time I kind of sort of start to move past it, I think we're going to be seeing him like 14 times a year in games for the next 5 years at least. And we're just, he's not going to just go away. If he was in any other division, it would be, there would be kind of an out of sight, out of mind. Even if you were playing him a couple series a year, you're still not in direct competition with them for the division. They're still not like standing in your way in that way. But this is just going to keep coming back up. This wound is going to be really, really hard to heal because you're not going to have distance. The whole thing about like having exes, it's good if you can just get away from them and not have to see them and just have them be out of your life. But when they're in your life for some reason and like you can't get away, you can't get that distance, you have to like keep engaging with them, then it's going to be harder to get past that. And this just has all the hallmarks of that kind of awful ex situation.
I grew up on High Fidelity, so I think you're supposed to keep circling around your exes and just making mixtapes.
Boy. No. This is why you just unfollow them on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. No, just so you don't have to look at them. But I guess
I'm too old to have any exes that I would have to unfollow.
I guess, yeah. Sorry, I forgot I'm the young one in this crowd. I'm used to work where I'm like, 10 years older than everybody. All right.
Jaymes, it was so long ago, I would have torn a page out of a phone book. That's how I would have gotten rid of them.
Wow. You mean they just put everybody's phone number out there in public like that? That's wild.
Basically.
All right. Well, I guess speaking of bad breakups, we need to talk about Mark Atanasios' press conference because he definitely sounded like someone who got blindsided with the dumping and was sort of flashing out and didn't know what to do about it. Let's just start with the quote that's kind of been making the most headlines so far. So kind of at the start, he said, quote, "We're all here today because we lost Craig. But I've reflected on this. Craig has lost us, and he's lost our community also. It's a really special place to be." Adding that he was, quote, "high on what we have. I can't imagine somebody wanting to be somewhere else." So I guess on the face of it, right, this is freaking insane and sounds like a jilted lover situation. But, it sounds even worse when we get to the second quote that we'll get to in a minute. But I guess the fact that this press conference happened and then this quote was like immediately panned, like among the national voices too, right? Like this is a really bad look, Ryan.
Yeah, this one really, this is Mark Atanasios' worst day as owner by far. Like this is it. It better not get much lower than this. He does look really, really bad in this. The whole quote adds a little bit of context, but like not enough, not really. Like he comes off, first off, placing himself in the community. Mr. Brooklyn, Mr. LA, yes, who comes in
zooming from LA. Yes.
Like
get all the way hell out of here.
Well, no. And like the thing is, he has been here for 20 years and like he does have a house here, whatever. Like there's some actual connection to the
his
community.
fail sons get to play Summerfest.
He does have some actual connection to the community, but like to place Counsell outside of the community where he's been since like, he was born, even when he was playing for other major league teams. And obviously that wasn't his decision. He lived in
Whitefish Bay the entire time.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Like obviously like all of that, this just looks like so unbelievably tone deaf on Atanasios' part that like you're saying he's the outsider and that you're the insider of the community. And
you don't get to gatekeep this. You're not
like, no,
you're not one of us. Stop it.
No, that's the thing here. And Steve, I know, has places he wants to go on this. So I'm just going to let him go on it because, go ahead.
Hey, he owns the Milwaukee Brewers. That's more Milwaukee than the Chicago fucking Cubs. So fuck Craig Counsell. I would tear off that goddamn plaque and throw it in Lake Michigan.
Oh, so that was your
get out of here.
Yeah. Jesus. Oh man. I thought Mark was torn up about this, but Steve, I'm sorry, man. This is we're going through the anger stage of
this is
right
still
now,
very raw and obviously still for a lot of people. I thought you were going to actually go to the thing we talked about earlier.
Which one was that?
When you were talking about the fact that like he's very, very wealthy and disconnected, and like so of course he's going to be disconnected from the fan base.
Sure.
Yeah, like I thought that's where you were going with that. I thought I teed that up for you, but I guess
I don't care about Ananazio's comments because I don't cheer for Mark Ananazio. I cheer for the Brewers. He's just the guy that happens to be a principal owner. So I don't give a shit about that. I'm only worried about how it affects like the team next season. So, and if that is, he basically screwed over the team in that way, exiting like this, then I'm going to be mad at Craig Counsell. Like I said, I don't care who the owner is because as long as it's the Milwaukee Brewers, it's just the Milwaukee team. Ananazio means nothing to me. I don't care. You know what? If Craig Counsell didn't like Ananazio's fail sons, I'd like to introduce him to the Ricketts.
There is a certain point to this where it's like everybody has been calling the Ricketts cheap for quite a while here and saying that they've refused to spend what they should spend on their team. And it's probably even more accurate in that case, considering the Cubs market and the Cubs overall, like what they have for like a revenue stream. It's way, way, way more than what the Milwaukee Brewers have. And at least, Atanasio was like down in the 20s. I think were the Cubs even in the top 10 this year? And they were supposedly trying to win and trying to go for it. And they were, I don't think they were in the top 10 for payrolls this year. So like, yes, you're going to get more financial support from the Cubs than you are from the Brewers, but in relative to market, relative to like capacity to spend, it's not really an upgrade. You're not getting a huge amount extra here from the Cubs in that way, because they've also been accused, and rightfully so, of being cheap.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to let Cody Bellinger walk without re-signing him after the season he had. So I don't know exactly what he's getting out of this. But I guess on the topic of cheap owners, it was reported over the weekend that the Brewers would apparently have the option to match whatever the best offer was. How true that turned out to be, I don't know. But obviously, when the price tag came in at $40 million and $8 million a year, Todd Rosiak at the Journal-Sentinel said the Brewers' best offer was $5.5 million. That would have still made him the highest paid manager in the game, but it was still more than $2 million less than what he eventually received. And, we also had that reporting saying that Craig Counsell was hoping to, reset the market for managers' salaries. And he really kind of bore that responsibility. And I guess, Mark Atanasio, I know Steve doesn't give a shit about him or what he has to say, but during that press conference, he kind of talked around the question when he was asked if he was actually given the opportunity to match. So the quote there was, "We didn't come together at the end. Relative to managers, most things are what someone's willing to pay for them. Craig was definitely a key part of our success, but if I wanted to list all the reasons we're successful, we'd be on this call for another half an hour. I think the analytics on that are a long way from being developed. That wouldn't enter into things for us." Craig, I'm not going to speak for Craig, but he spoke plenty over the past several weeks as to what he was trying to do. We'll see if it was successful or not, or if it was a one-off. So that definitely kind of felt like, if not a shot, at least a reference at Counsell wanting to reset the market there. And it, reading between the lines, it seems pretty clear too. He was not interested in matching that number if he was given the opportunity. So I guess, Steve, I know you're still mad at Craig as making the decision to leave, but if he was given that $8 million and the Brewers were even entertaining that. I mean, could you blame him for leaving still?
Well, it's ridiculous if the Brewers wouldn't match that. Like it doesn't affect your payroll in any way. Like your actual like salary structure for the 40-man roster and how that works. Like you can just sign managers and coaches for whatever price you want, and it's just part of your budget. So the idea that they would like balk at that for any reason is ridiculous, especially when they know what Counsell's value is, unless they know that they have somebody waiting in the wings that can do a similar job to him, which is hard to imagine just because over, was it 9 seasons, what Counsell's track record is?
Yep.
And it didn't seem like the players were tiring of him, because that's the one thing you kind of worry about when somebody's there for a while, is that they're not connecting with the players anymore. I mean, nine seasons is a lot. There aren't many guys that make it that long. But yeah, if they balked at that was stupid on the Brewers' part. Just do it. There's no reason not to. But it also looked like Counsell wanted any reason to leave.
Fair.
Yeah, let me deal with the first part of that first, and we'll get to the second part later. You're 100% right. If this really was, and it does seem more and more likely that this really was about the Brewers refusing to go an extra like $2.5 million a year on Counsell, to go from the 5.5 they offered him to the $8 million that the Cubs gave him, regardless of whether or not they gave him the chance to match or whatever, that the Brewers didn't go in with that offer. And if the Brewers had come in with that offer, what the Cubs gave him, if they had made that offer to him this summer, I'm 99% sure he would have signed this deal months ago and it would be a done deal. And I think that had to have come sort of to crystallize in time as to what he was looking for. I think he probably told the Brewers that's what he was looking for, that he was trying to get back up to that Joe Torre money. And he certainly was up front, or his agent was, or whoever was speaking to the media on his behalf, because we heard over and over and over the past week here about how he was, just looking to reset the manager pay scale and that all of that stuff. If that's really the thing that stopped this from happening, it is unbelievably, and I'll say it, fucking stupid. It is just absolutely fucking stupid that happened. And it is the blackest mark on Attanasio's record at this point. And I wonder what is behind it. What's the thought process there? Because I certainly can't see that they don't see the value in Counsell. Maybe they think that he's more easily replaced. Maybe they think that it isn't that hard to get a good manager. And, maybe they have something of a point there that Counsell was special and he had special value to this community, but maybe it would be possible to get somebody who's a good manager. Also, I think they probably will hire a good manager. That's fine. But you already have this guy. He's part of the community. You already have it. It's here. You're not talking about that much money. And to let, a $2.5 million get in the way there is just fucking stupid. Period.
I will point out, though, everyone's replaceable. Like the idea that we can't replace Craig Counsell. No, seriously though.
No, I know.
In the moment, we go. What's good about Counsell is it's a known quantity. That's why we don't want to lose it. You know what you have. You have the best manager in the game. It's a known quantity. Like, don't let that go, because now you're in limbo and you're taking a chance on the next guy. That doesn't mean they can't find the next guy to do basically the same thing, especially if they have a good working relationship with the front office and they're able to implement plans the way the Counsell did. Like, it'll be interesting to see how good Craig Counsell is with another organization. Was Craig Counsell a great manager because he had a good understanding of analytics with the Brewers, or was it independent of that? I mean, I don't know. Obviously, there's going to be some kind of working relationship with the front office, but I don't know. Maybe we'll see what the difference is between the Brewers and the Cubs this, upcoming season, with how Craig Counsell manages the Cubs as a whole.
Yeah, we're going to see, and it's going to be nauseating, and I hate every minute of thinking about it.
I do wonder, though, if that was part of it, because another part of Attanasio's press conference, he at least claimed, I don't know if we want to take it at face value or not, but he claimed that Counsell told him in early September that he was maybe starting to think about not only just returning in 2024, but looking at opportunities outside of Milwaukee. So I don't know if that's part of it, of just feeling like it's time to move on, or if he does kind of want to prove something by going to the Cubs, a different front office, and saying, hey, I was a large part of the success. It wasn't just the organization, you know? I mean, I think that's natural after almost a decade in one place, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I guess, before we get into what the after Counsell era looks like, let's just kind of wrap this part up by going and just maybe wondering what exactly happened here, because obviously a lot of people were blindsided. I don't know, like, Ryan, what do you think happened? I know we spent like weeks just pontificating on whether or not like Brian Anderson for some reason was a pivot point for this, but was that just like a sign of just larger discontent with the front office or the organization, or what?
First off, I think money is a factor here. Until I see some sort of refutation of the fact that like they wouldn't go that extra bit to get him, I think money was a factor here. So you can't dismiss it. It's part of the thing, and that's a huge fail on the part of ownership. But I think there were other things as well. I think that egos involved here were probably a big deal, and I'm talking about kind of all the people involved. I think I made a joke on Twitter that like, hey, do you think David Stearns is like kind of quietly relieved here a little bit, or at least part of him is, that he won't have to share credit for turning the Mets around with Craig Counsell, because that's how that was going to go. And like these guys are incredibly like successful and driven and competitive people, like extremely competitive people. You don't get into this unless you're extremely competitive, and also rich people, extremely competitive and can be petty and very egotistical. And I think that like ego here was part of it. Like there was part of it, somehow not wanting to back down, not wanting to like find a compromise. Something happened there, and I don't know who gets assigned what blame and how exactly, but like egos were definitely in play here. So money, egos, and there was probably some sort of relationship issue. I know people have been throwing that article from last year from Adam McCalvey about how Craig and Matt Arnold were close all those years when, Arnold was an assistant to David Stearns, and they had their old man walks. That's what they called them, out in Whitefish Bay. And they'd go out and they'd talk about stuff. And it sounded like they would argue about stuff, like in a productive, constructive way. But like, it sounded like Arnold would say stuff about like things the front office was doing, and Craig would like challenge him on those things. And it sounded good and productive and whatever. But you also have to wonder, we have evidence from this year that there was some weird stuff. That Brian Anderson thing will always stick as part of the thing. Was there some sort of just basic fundamental disagreement where they didn't see eye to eye on stuff and neither one wanted to back down? Again, that might be to my point about egos here. So money, egos, relationships, probably somewhat in that order, I think is what happened here.
Steve, any ideas on what might have gone on behind the scenes?
Well, no, I have no idea exactly what went on behind the scenes. I'm not going to even pretend to have any kind of insight into that. Obviously,
thanks, Steve.
Well, no, I guess my point is it's funny because I think looking at it, it's like, okay, where was the one pain point? Who was the one that caused this? Mm-hmm. That's kind of the way I think our brains work on this. Was it Ananazio? Was it Arnold? But I mean, I don't know. Again, it was 9 years. It could have been things piling up. Craig Counsell started out in the front office, but after 9 years, how much of a disconnect was there between the Craig Counsell that was a part of the front office and moved into the dugout versus now was just an on-field manager? Like, did he really have that relationship anymore after that amount of time? And was that part of what the strain was? I don't know. We'll see what it is. I mean, again, it's easy to just say, well, Mark Ananazio sucks. I'm not going to disagree with anybody, but again, like all owners suck. Like,
yeah,
name the good owner out there. Like, there isn't one. So, I mean, yeah, Mark Ananazio sucks, but they're all going to do the same thing. They're all going to pinch pennies. They're all going to probably butt in too much. And, if they have children involved, they're going to try to get them too involved with the team or something like that. And again, we bring that up as a joke more than anything else because they're involved, but he's not promoting them to general manager, at least yet. The moment that happens, then we have some trouble. But if you want to be reasonable about it, I would say a lot of it just has to do with time, and changing relationships over basically a decade. And it's a decade plus when you consider, again, the time used in the front office with the team, and that's going to make a big difference. There's going to be turnover there. So it's not going to be the same people that he originally came up with, and then took over with, and obviously with Stearns going. But I think even if Stearns was here, it would probably be a similar outcome because Stearns, he'd make cutthroat decisions, about who was going to be on the roster and how he wanted him used. I don't think that would be any different from what Arnold does.
Yeah, I think it's totally natural over the course of a decade to, you have a history with that organization you've been working with, but like you said, Steve, a million little things pile up to the point where the little things start to feel like bigger things. And, those old man walks where you're disagreeing about concepts become actual disagreements where you're like, oh, I can't work with this person. It's super easy to see that happening.
None of this is to excuse Craig Counsell. He can still rot in hell.
Just so we're clear. Yeah.
Yeah, just so we're clear.
Yeah, I was going to say the disagreements are a little bit different when you're dealing with the underling. Well, two underlings talking about what should happen as opposed to the guy who's actually going to be making the decision now is Matt Arnold. Like it's his decision. And that takes on a different tone and a different relationship at that point. Like when one person ascends to that power from a position of, relative equality before to now one is in charge of the decisions and the other one has to kind of live with them. That could also change and fracture relationships. Happens all the time.
Yep. All right. So I guess let's just focus now on what happens next. What fallout do we anticipate here? Specifically, I guess a couple of things come to mind here. But first of all, does this put Mark Adonasio's ownership tenure, so to speak, in a more untenable situation or position? He already had a decent position or portion of the fan base thinking he was a cheap boss to begin with. And, if he's cheaping out over a couple $1 million here, that can't really help that. But Steve, I know you're making that face and you disagree.
Are the Brewers making money? Are they making money for their ownership group? As long as they're making money, Mark Adonasio's fine. Like, he doesn't have to worry about anything. Like, they're not going to, it's the principal owner, but he's still going to be able to wield power. So no, it doesn't affect him in any way.
Yeah. Remember, it can affect his bottom line if people stop showing up in droves to the park or something like that.
Well, that's why I said, are they still making money?
Yeah, there's some downside here for him for sure, but ultimately, I think MLB ownership, if we know anything, is relatively insulated from consequences of their decisions at this point. Like, unless they go like completely ham, like Peter Seidler did over the last couple of years, they're generally shielded from the consequences of their actions by the fact that MLB just is such a cash cow and they're producing so much revenue generally that. And that if he senses that that's a problem, he can pull the strings even tighter, and we can go to what like the Pirates fans have been dealing with for a long time, which we haven't been, to be clear. Like, we haven't had to deal with that. It can get so much worse than what people think is so bad under Attanasio, and that's a point I've just made for like so long, but it can get so much worse. But this is a challenge for him. Like this, he is going to need to build up goodwill. He is going to need to do things to figure out ways to get goodwill, and just winning in the regular season isn't going to do it. Like,
no,
there's things that are going to need to happen. Ultimately, winning in the postseason is one, but like spending money is another. He's going to have to win people over and get people back on his side that way. Because remember, for the first 10 years of his ownership tenure, people loved the man. They thought he was the savior. Really until the last 3-4 years, he was kind of viewed as Milwaukee's savior. You really had to go pretty deep. Nobody was complaining about Mark Attanasio even in 2015. To be clear. The people that were like me and Steve complaining about the Jeff Suppan, Matt Garza,
Right.
and Kyle Loesch signings. Like
Yes.
those are the people who got upset about Mark Attanasio back then. Not about.
It is funny how that's flipped.
It is.
Yeah.
It is funny, and it's
it's very much flipped.
It's a irony that I live with all the time, Steve. It comes up into my mind more frequently than it should. The amount of space that is taking up in my brain is not healthy. So, anyways, yeah, but he does legitimately have a problem here. But how serious that problem is, I don't know.
You know what? If Jackson Chourio comes up and rakes, his problem's gonna be taken care of.
Yeah,
Sure.
especially if he signs him to an extension before he comes up and rakes, or soon after he comes up and rakes.
Yeah.
And he, hey, here's our next guy, Milwaukee. This is your superstar, and he's going to be here for 10 to 12 years.
Yeah, I mean, you want to solve the issue. That's a pretty easy way to do it.
That would be a productive use of his time and resources and face-saving efforts. I wholeheartedly endorse this plan, Steve.
There we solved it.
There we go.
Podcast
We agreed on
over.
something. Yeah. When Ryan and Steve agree, we have to stop. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's another whole last page of questions here we got to get through. So, I don't know how much this will affect the situation with the stadium deal, but any chance there's some negative PR there. I mean, I still feel like it's going to get done. I mean, I doubt. I saw this pop up a little bit today, bad time for this when they're trying to get this approved, but ultimately, it's in the hands of the legislature now. Fan stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's a freight train. It's not stopping. Plus, the way they structured that deal, they're going to saddle both the city and the county with more debt. So that's a win for the Republican legislature. That's what they're always looking to do.
Yeah.
I was going to say the last time you were this fired up, Steve, is you had a couple 9% beers and started talking about politics in the state. So,
well, let's not remind him of that, James. Let's just keep going on with this and talk about the fact that, Steve is right.
Yeah.
This is
hey! If Robin Voss would quit defunding the UW system, maybe Craig Counsell's kids would have stayed in the state, and he wouldn't want to leave.
Butterfly flaps its wings. Exactly. Yeah. This ultimately it all comes back to that. All right. So, anyways, back to the matter at hand here. The stadium deal is, it's a freight train. I don't think it's going to stop. I barely think it's going to be a blip. There will definitely be people that use this, people that are opposed to it. I've already seen some of it. People that are generally opposed to this will use this as a thing to argue against it.
It's a stupid reason to oppose it because there are many good reasons to oppose the stadium deal.
Well, but also when you're in this situation, you latch on to whatever you can as far as public discontent with a deal.
Well, yeah, no. I understand that, but I'm just saying, there are plenty of good reasons to oppose the stadium deal.
Yes, yeah, we've been over all of that though. So but I don't think any of us thinks this is going to even be much of a blip on the radar there. I think it's going to proceed.
All right, let's talk about happier things in the future. Hopefully, maybe what's Matt Arnold's path forward here? Because they mentioned during the press conference, at least Attanasio did, that Matt Arnold's already been doing kind of background on a number of candidates, just in case something exactly like this happens. So, I guess what are the most important things you're looking for in a replacement? Attanasio did say the rest of the coaching staff's going to be back in 2024. So that tells me at least that maybe an internal candidate is likely. But Steve, where do they go from here?
I mean, I think you want somebody who's young, someone who relates to players, and someone who's going to work directly with the front office, basically implementing their plan for how to run games. That's what you're looking for in a new manager. I think Ryan was the one who memorized JR's article today, his listicle on all the potential managerial candidates. But yeah, there are a couple that were right up on top of that that I think were interesting candidates. And it's hard to say because, one of them, they should go out and get Carlos Villanueva. And part of that is it's a familiar name. Mm-hmm. He's kind of been bouncing around and getting put into that, rising up the ranks to potentially get in a managerial position. So it's easy to pick out names, so obviously I'd like to make sure that they're a little bit more careful with their picks than just going with like someone who's familiar, because aside from a couple fans, like nobody's really going to care whether or not they know who the manager is. So, like I said, make sure it's somebody who relates to the players before anything else.
Yep. The number one thing is relates to the players and has outstanding leadership qualities to take them through what's going to be like a rough transition. I think this has the potential to be rough and for it to be a culture shock. So I think that like those things are really important. Again, somebody who works with the front office really well, like Craig did, like all the good managers these days work well with the front office. That's a really important part of this. And yeah, the young part that would help, I think potentially being Latino would help, especially because the Brewers have a number of Latino prospects and guys who've already broken in. They have a number of guys like that, but just like within the game, it's a good thing to have that coming up. But the number one important thing is you have to get it right. You have to hire somebody who is good at the job and is ready to go. And I think kind of hit the ground running. I think that's going to be important because I don't think they're going to want to take a step back, but that's coming up.
Good luck.
I was going to say, next question here is, does this change anything on how you operate this winter?
I think Matt Arnold should use this as a shield and trade Christian Yelich and his 19 home runs while he can.
Getting to the rest of the Steve platform while we're here on the show. Yeah,
we really are running down the Steve platform tonight. Like this is his stump speech.
Hey, I just wanted to make sure we get the over under bet there we had on the Yelich home runs. So
There we go. Play the hits. Does this change how you were thinking, Steve? I guess on what they should do with Corbin Burns, Willy Adames, Devin Williams, anything?
I mean, I was up for trading Corbin Burns this offseason. I don't know. I guess did they play the PR game, or do they say we're going to bring in a young manager? Let's do the rebuild game.
Right.
I think they could go either way. People are pissed either way. So I guess, if you're going to try to do a full rebuild, like just take it all on in one season. This is when you're at your cap limit with the Packers being in cap hell right now. You just take on, it'll be their own version of a cap hell by taking on all the bad PR all at one time.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right. I think that's correct, Steve. I think
rip the Band-Aid off.
There's sort of a rip the Band-Aid off thing here where like you're at a low point. You might as well just like rip it off, go forward, and just kind of proceed that way. I can see an argument for that. I definitely can. I think it's not necessarily going to happen because I think
I'd be really surprised if they did it. Right. Like if they really ripped that Band-Aid off. But like I said, and Ryan, you can talk about this in more detail, but with the amount of talent they have coming up behind, like you get a bunch of young guys who can explode onto the scene. Like that's how people get excited. That's when people are really excited. Yeah, that's when people get really excited about a team. We've seen when you kind of get aging talent and they keep just, I don't know, making the playoffs, which tends to be a horrible thing for most people because they hate metaphors. Again, apparently, like if you had a young squad to get behind that, that creates a lot of buzz and excitement. So, they might be getting there. I doubt they'll make that big move, but we'll see.
Well, the thing is, they kind of have that coming no matter what, right? Those guys are here or they're going to be here very quickly. They have the freshman group from this year. They have this next group coming in over the next year to 2 years. They have this sort of this cohort of all these good young players coming through. And so I think they probably are tempted to say, we're not that bad a team. We think we can just reset. We can reset and go from this, that everybody's going to be counting us out and our players can definitely play the nobody believed in us card. And here we go. We're going to show everybody that they're wrong. And this roster is more talented. This is a team that won 92 games last year, right? Like they won 92 games last year. And
I mean, 92, that's, yeah, you can win a bad division, but it's not a ton of breathing room.
No,
so like a little bit of a step back means not a playoff team.
Yes, but they also have the young talent coming, and they could potentially add in the market here and do some things out in the market, because they have a pretty low payroll right now. They have a lot of payroll wiggle room. So it's
all that Counsell money they saved.
Sure, they could reinvest that
another
in
reliever.
Yeah,
exactly. Jeez.
So, but there are a couple different ways I can see this going. Frankly, I'm kind of okay with either. If they say, hey, look, we want to take a step back here and get a running start, I think if they do trade off Burns, Adames, Williams, they will get a number of players who can help them either right away or in the very near future for those guys, and add that to the group of players that they have and their penchant for being able to develop up pitchers, and the fact that, they just generally kind of know what they're doing. I think that they could be good a lot quicker than what people would expect if they do rip the Band-Aid off. Like, this wouldn't be a deep, dark rebuild. We'd be talking about a relatively quick sort of boomerang rebound. But I also think it's kind of unlikely, because I think they truly would like to be good next year and show people. So
they should trade Burns now before he loses his arbitration case, and then they got to deal with another bad PR cycle in February.
There we go. It definitely does feel like a bit of a fork in the road moment for the franchise. So I'm definitely interested to see how it plays out. But, leave it to Ryan to bring the optimism on that front. So all the prospects will turn out great. Jackson Chourio definitely won't bust, and the Brewers will be good next year. It seems to be Mark Adonasio's plan. So I don't know. We'll see. I guess we can leave it at that, unless you guys have anything else you want to add on this topic. Steve, anything?
No, I got all my rage out. We're good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that one thing that shouldn't be missed here is overall the organization's in a pretty good place. Talent-wise, they still have a very good farm system. They still have, I don't know if you guys caught the news, it got subsumed pretty quickly, that they promoted a bunch of people. I think they promoted 4 or 5 guys within their front office to higher positions this morning before the Counsell news broke. So I think they have sort of an up and running machine here that can continue to be competitive and find ways to win, despite obstacles and despite, the problems that they face, like just structurally from, what the franchise, like the market and all that stuff. I think they have a lot going for them. And it's good not to forget that like overall the picture's still decent, but there's reparation work that needs to be done here. There's stuff that needs to be, there are relationships with the fans that need to be repaired. There's, the players need to be sort of figured in this, and whoever they hire to run things, they need to repair those feelings and those relationships and get that going positive again. So there's work to be done, but I think ultimately this team is still in a pretty good place overall.
All right. That seems like a good rosy point to wrap things up. So thanks again, Steve, for hopping in and sharing your rage. Hopefully this was therapeutic for you. I feel like you kind of mellowed over the last hour, so I'm glad we could help with that. All right.
The beer taken, it's settling in.
There we go. All right. Well, if you all haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, wherever else you listen to your podcast. And while you're there, please do leave us a review to help other people find the podcast. And if you're just tuning into this episode after the big news to see what we're all about and liked what you heard, please do tell your friends about us. We would definitely appreciate that as well. Mm-hmm. Again, a reminder, you can support the podcast. Go to patreon.com/MKE tailgate for only $2 a month, and you get question priority when we send out a call for questions for next week's episode. So, I feel like we touched on a lot here, but I'm sure there's a lot we didn't get to, or a lot of things that'll come up in the coming days that we'll want to talk about too in our next episode. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in, everyone, and joining this therapy session with us. Hope we can all get through this together. We'll be back next time on Milwaukee's Tailgate. Have a good one, everyone.
Fair weather fan, it's not what I am, even though the zip code has changed. I might smile and joy when I'm unemployed. You're so Yeah.